For decades, Jay Leno appeared to live a life that millions envied, a man everyone thought they understood. But behind the jokes, the engine roar, and the late-night glow, he was carrying burdens no audience ever saw. Jay lived by a rhythm that pushed him far beyond normal limits, hiding a second world that demanded just as much from him as television ever did. Only now, after tragedy forced the truth into the open, can the full story finally be told. The man who never stopped moving. Long before Jay Leno became the face of American late-night television, his life was shaped by a restlessness he could never fully escape. Born in 1950 to Angelo and Catherine Leno, Jay grew up in Andover, Massachusetts, where discipline and hard work defined the home. His father sold insurance, his mother came from Scotland, and his older brother Patrick would later serve in Vietnam before becoming an attorney. But Jay's childhood revolved around an old garage, a handful of tools, and an obsession with taking things apart simply to understand how they worked. That quiet curiosity created the foundation for the double life he would eventually live. By the time he reached elementary school, teachers knew he wasn't like other kids. His fifth-grade report card carried a sentence that now reads like fate. If Jay spent as much time studying as he does trying to be a comedian, he'd be a big star. He didn't study more. He simply doubled down on humor. At Emerson College in Boston, where he graduated in 1973 with a degree in speech therapy, Jay founded the school's first comedy club. What no one realized was that this club marked the beginning of two parallel paths. By day, he worked in a garage near campus. By night, he chased laughter in dim bars. This rhythm soon became a lifestyle. In the early 1970s, while Boston's comedy scene exploded, Jay was performing nightly while still repairing cars to pay rent. He once said, "By day I was covered in grease, by night surrounded by laughter." But even that didn't reveal the full truth. His two identities, mechanic and comedian, were not hobbies. They were survival. They were discipline. They were a blueprint for the life he would build. When he moved to Los Angeles in 1973, the pattern followed him. He worked in a Burbank garage to stay afloat, then performed at the Comedy Store until closing hours. By the time he appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson on March 2, 1977, Jay had already lived years defined by exhaustion, ambition, and a pace no ordinary person could maintain. His success didn't slow him down. It only pushed him harder. For Jay Leno, movement itself became a shield, a way to outrun everything he didn't want the world to see, the rise to the throne and the life no one saw. As the 1980s unfolded, Jay Leno's path toward national fame accelerated with a speed that shocked even those closest to him. While other comedians spent years drifting between small clubs, Jay built a reputation as one of the hardest-working performers in the country. He booked more than 300 shows a year, flying from state to state, often finishing a set near midnight only to wake up a few hours later for another performance. His humor was clean, precise, and grounded in everyday life, qualities that made him accessible to the broadest possible audience. Yet beneath the reliability that viewers loved, a restless urgency pulsed through him, the same urgency that had lived in that young boy dismantling engines in a Massachusetts garage. In 1987, NBC officially named him a permanent guest host of The Tonight Show. It was a seismic moment in late-night history, signaling the network's growing trust in a man whose consistency had become his signature. But the promotion also pulled him deeper into an identity split. Off television, Jay still spent hours in his garage, repairing rusted cars by hand as if his life depended on it. To him, the grease-stained knuckles and the late-night monologues served the same purpose. Both were exercises in control, in discipline, in keeping his hands moving so his mind never had to sit still. By 1992, when Johnny Carson retired, Jay was chosen to take the throne many assumed belonged to David Letterman. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Headlines accused him of backstabbing, his manager was painted as a villain, and Jay, the soft-spoken comic who avoided controversy, suddenly found himself portrayed as the antagonist of late-night television. He responded the only way he knew how. He kept working. Night after night, he refined his timing until audiences gravitated back toward him. In 1993, NBC rewarded him with a $40 million contract. By 1995, he was pulling in more than 5 million viewers a night. What fans didn't realize was that his garage life didn't disappear when he took over The Tonight Show. It simply moved into the shadows. Every day after taping, he returned to Burbank, swapping suits for overalls, fame for machinery, cameras for the steady discipline of engines. It became the perfect double life. The public saw the host, the icon, the unshakable figure. The private world housed a quieter truth, that even at the height of his fame, Jay Leno still needed the solitude of steel to survive. 2 lives, 1 man. Fame, fortune, and the machinery that saved him. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, Jay Leno stood at the peak of American entertainment. His version of The Tonight Show dominated ratings, pulling ahead of David Letterman and attracting millions of viewers nightly. The success translated into extraordinary wealth. NBC's profits surged, advertisers fought for placement, and Jay became one of the most recognizable faces in television. But while the world celebrated his rise, he continued living a routine far different from what fame typically breeds. Instead of lavish vacations or sprawling mansions, Jay poured his time and money into an obsession few people outside his circle truly understood. His garage in Burbank, eventually known as Big Dog Garage, grew into a mechanical cathedral. Over the years, Jay acquired more than 180 cars and 160 motorcycles, each meticulously restored, cataloged, and test-driven by his own hands. Many of these machines were rare historical artifacts: a McLaren F1 worth more than $20 million, 2 Doble steam cars once owned by Howard Hughes, and a 1909 Baker Electric he gifted to his wife, Mavis. The collection wasn't a trophy display for the wealthy. It was the second half of his identity, a continuation of the boy who once spent hours disassembling motors in Andover. Jay often said, "Cars are the only thing that make me quiet." And in those quiet moments, away from the roar of audience applause, he found the grounding that show business could never provide. Even during his Tonight Show years, Jay lived with astonishing discipline. He toured across the country almost every weekend, performing an average of 150 stand-up shows each year while still taping the program. He slept around 4 hours a night, avoided alcohol, and famously never touched his Tonight Show salary, living only off his stand-up income. He liked to joke, "I work, and my money relaxes." But beneath the humor was a deeper truth. Jay's relentless work ethic wasn't just ambition, it was armor. His life appeared effortless from the outside, yet the pace he set was almost inhuman. And as the show moved toward its first transition in 2009, Jay seemed unstoppable, powered by an engine that never cooled. But the same drive that made him a legend was also pushing him toward a breaking point, one that neither fame nor machinery could prepare him for: fire, metal, and the accidents that nearly ended everything. For most of his life, Jay Leno believed that work could outrun anything: pain, fear, even time itself. But in November 2022, that belief was violently tested. Inside his massive Burbank garage, where he had spent decades restoring the past, a 1907 white steam car turned a normal afternoon into a near-fatal disaster. While checking a clogged fuel line, gasoline sprayed across his face. Jay knew exactly how close he was to the pilot light. One spark was all it took. Flames erupted instantly, swallowing his face and hands. He later described it with a chilling simplicity. "My face was on fire." Most people would panic. Jay held his breath, shut his eyes, and tried to crawl out from under the car as 10 seconds stretched into an eternity. His friend, Dave Kilacki, pulled him free just in time, extinguishing the flames before they took his eyesight. Paramedics rushed him to the Grossman Burn Center, where doctors determined his burns were deeper than they appeared. He underwent skin grafts using human donor tissue and pig intestine, followed by hyperbaric chamber treatment. For many, the ordeal would have required months of recovery. Jay left the hospital in 10 days and was back on stage performing stand-up 6 days later. It was the stubbornness that defined him, but also the refusal to let anyone see how much he was hurting. Barely 2 months later, in January 2023, fate struck again. While testing a vintage motorcycle, Jay rode down a side road and failed to see a thin wire stretched across it. The impact threw him off the bike, breaking his collarbone, 2 ribs, and cracking his kneecaps. Another hospital stay followed. And yet again, he refused to cancel his shows, telling reporters, "I cracked a few parts, but the laughter's still intact." It was bravado, but it masked a reality he rarely admitted. His body, the same one that had survived decades of stress and abuse, was starting to show its limits. Then came the third blow in early 2024, when Jay slipped down an 18-meter slope during a filming trip in Pennsylvania, fracturing his wrist and bruising his face. In every accident, he asked the same question before anything else. "Is the car okay?" It was a joke on the surface, but it exposed something deeper, that mechanics and comedy had become shields for a man who could not afford to fall apart. Yet beneath the toughness, a quieter truth was emerging. Jay Leno was breakable, and soon tragedy would strike in a way that left no room for jokes or engines to hide behind. The diagnosis that changed everything, a silent battle no one saw coming. Jay Leno had survived the kinds of dangers that most people only read about: fire, metal, high-speed accidents, and the relentless pace of a career that demanded perfection every night. But the threat that finally forced him to pause didn't come with flames or impact. It arrived quietly, inside his own body, in the form of a stroke that struck without warning. One night, Jay suddenly found himself unable to speak properly. His team rushed him from the studio to a nearby hospital, where doctors discovered what he had unknowingly been carrying for years: dangerously high cholesterol and a significant blockage near his heart. Unlike the burn accident or the motorcycle crash, this wasn't a dramatic moment he could joke about. This was silent, invisible, and far deadlier. The Mayo Clinic explained the stakes clearly. Clogged arteries increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes, the kind that can end a life instantly or leave permanent damage. And Jay was now living on borrowed time. He later described the threat using a metaphor only he could craft. "It's like in a car. One speck of dirt in the jet, and boom, no more fuel gets through." In his case, the dirt was cholesterol, and the engine was his heart. He began treatment immediately, using medication and a portable EKG device connected to his iPhone to monitor irregular rhythms. He adjusted his diet, cutting soda to 1 or 2 a week, avoiding alcohol and cigarettes entirely. But he admitted he wasn't a health purist. He still loved steak and Italian food. The truth was painful. Even as he tried to repair his body, decades of pushing himself had left marks that no wrench could fix. Despite everything, the stroke, the heart blockage, the medical warnings, he refused to slow down. After the Oscars, when most of Hollywood was recovering, Jay was back in his garage. He still toured constantly, performing more than 150 stand-up dates in 2024 alone. He still slept 4 hours a night, still woke up early, still believed work was survival. The double life exposed, caring for Mavis, and the goodbye no one expected. For more than 40 years, Jay Leno and his wife, Mavis, lived a quiet and steady life behind the storm of fame. They married in 1980 after 4 years of dating, built a marriage rooted in loyalty rather than Hollywood spectacle, and chose not to have children, content with their shared routines, their advocacy, their travels, and the comfort of simply being together. But in 2024, the life they built changed forever. Mavis was diagnosed with advanced dementia, and the man who had survived explosions, crashes, and a failing heart suddenly faced a battle he could neither outrun nor repair. When Jay filed for conservatorship in January 2024, court documents revealed what he had kept private for years. Mavis's memory was fading faster than anyone realized. Her neurologist, Dr. Hart Cohen, reported that she often could not remember her birth date. Some days, she struggled to recognize Jay. She ruminated about her parents, both long gone, and lived in cycles of confusion that left her lost in time. And then came the most heartbreaking detail of all. For 3 years, she woke up every morning believing she was hearing about her mother's death for the very first time. Each sunrise forced her to relive grief as if it were brand new. Jay described the moment with quiet devastation. Not just crying, learning for the first time. And that was really tricky. He stepped fully into the role of caretaker, doing everything for her, feeding her, dressing her, taking her to the bathroom. He tried to make the hardest moments feel lighter. When he carried her, he joked, "This is Jay and Mavis at the high school prom," moving her back and forth until she smiled. She still knew his face, and he clung to that as a small mercy. "She's not forgetting me. That hasn't happened yet." Her appetite returned, but she could no longer travel, no longer dine out, no longer live the life they once enjoyed. So he brought the world to her. Travel videos, animal shows, quiet drives through California. He rearranged his work schedule, flying to Puerto Rico for a show and returning home the same day so he wouldn't miss a night with her. He said simply, "As soon as this ride's over, I'm going home, and I'll make her lunch." The man who once lived 2 full lives, comedian by night, mechanic by day, now lived only one, caretaker. And in his own words, he considered it the greatest test of the vows they once exchanged. For better or worse. Even the worse isn't that bad, he said softly, as if reminding himself. After surviving machines, fire, steel, and the weight of fame, Jay Leno now faced the one challenge he couldn't fix with a wrench or a joke. This time, his double life wasn't a secret. It was devotion, the final quiet chapter of a man who spent 3 decades hiding his struggles and now stands in the open, showing the world what love truly costs. Jay Leno spent decades hiding the weight he carried, living 2 demanding lives until tragedy finally revealed what he had been fighting all along. His story is no longer just about fame or engines. It's about loyalty, resilience, and the price of loving someone through their darkest days. What part of Jay Leno's journey surprised you the most? If you found this story meaningful, remember to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter.